After a long hiatus, I'm back with an episode about glitch art. I interviewed Omnia Sol, the host of the Omnia Sol art show. We talk about the history and methods of glitch art, life as a glitch in reality, creative destruction, magic spells, materialism, anti-capitalism, and lots of other stuff. Okay, Omnia Sol, welcome to the Robot Godcast. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
You have a couple podcasts. You make the Omnia Sol podcast and the Shatcast. Yeah, the Omnia Sol. So you glitch movies or shows visually, and sometimes you interview people. Sometimes you kind of just talk about culture and things. Um, what does Omnia Sol mean? First off,
So, Omnia Sol is Latin for everywhere sun. I started using it as a kind of pen name, artist name around, I think it was 2018, 2017. I think it was 2018, but it was around the time before I had released kind of comics and zines under my legal name, and then using the kind of moniker of Dumpster Pizza Press to release zines. I switched to Omnia Soul because the Dumpster Pizza Press came from, I had a roommate's friend who slept on our couch for a few weeks, who lived entirely off of Little Caesars dumpster pizza because he was anti-capitalist to the point where even though he had like a job on a farm, was making money, he refused to buy groceries and just
wow.
lived entirely off of dumpster pizza. But then I wanted to change what I was doing, and I didn't want the name of the art that I was putting out to be associated with garbage anymore. And so I went with Omnia Soul. For I was very much interested into kind of solar worship, mythology, and veneration. And specifically, I loved the Egyptian mythology of Ra taking the boat across the sky as the sun boat, and conquering, and then kind of the dying when he's gone, and then always kind of resurrecting the next day. And so I was looking into kind of different phrases of that, and I thought of kind of Sol Invictus, the unconquerable sun god in Roman mythology. But then Sol Invictus art was already taken, and then when I stumbled across Omnia Sol, I found out it was from the Carmina Burana, specifically the line Omnia Sol Temperate, which is the sun warms everything. And I had actually participated in a children's choir when I was in fourth grade that did the Carmina Burana, and it's always been just like the Carl Orff musical piece has always been just very much kind of I've always loved it, and it's always been kind of like influential to me in that using kind of these monks text and taking it and making something new out of it. I just really liked that. So as far as the art show, it kind of started as the Omnia Soul art show started as kind of a pandemic art project of I originally wanted to be, living at home and living not working and being kind of very isolated from people. I wanted to kind of pursue streaming, and then for a variety of reasons which we can get into, kind of changed into a more planned out talk show as opposed to being like a video um, music show.
Is there a connection between Omnia Sol and glitch art, like between the theme of the sun and Egyptian mythology and glitch art, or do they just both happen to be you?
Not entirely. I think when I took the moniker of Omnia Soul, I wasn't working primarily in glitch art. I got my background is in printmaking, traditional woodblock printmaking, which is pretty funny to where I am now of most of my work being video work or digital. Um, and specifically, I would do like comics and zines using traditional print making technology, woodcut technology. And then for a variety of reasons, I switched to more drawing and painting after college, just because I didn't have access to a press, and hand printing is very, very difficult. And I got into glitch art specifically with kind of still images, still photography, and taking an image file into a text file, messing with the text, seeing what results you get, taking a BMP into the sound software Audacity, as taking it in as raw data and applying different effects, and both seeing what I could get both sonically and visually out there. Because then if you export it again as a BMP, you can get some very interesting kind of sonic effects that affect the visual. And I got into kind of video work later, but yeah, there's no real relation, because I think when I took the moniker of Omnia Sol, I was very much just in painting. And there was kind of this analog glitch art too, of a lot of the paintings I do are line art that's layered on top of each other, that when you try to take photographs or video, it makes your camera itself glitch out and creates these kind of optical illusions.
So how would you define glitch art then? Because we all recognize it when we see it, but like if you had to define it for somebody who has never seen it before, what would you say is the definition?
I guess the definition I would go with is a very broad definition, but a art form that embraces the inherent bugs or mistakes within technology, and then glamorizes it or puts it on a pedestal and kind of like embraces it. So you'll see glitch. It's kind of that debate of the Armut urinal, the first like found object art piece, of like taking a urinal, putting it on side, and putting in a gallery space is what creates just this everyday object and makes it art. So when you see a LED sign that is either broken or the program is off and it's just tweaking out and showing different colors that aren't supposed to be there instead of the advertisement you're supposed to see, that is glitch art. But or it is a glitch, but then it's not glitch art until it's kind of like taken and put it into the context of art.
So what happens when you put it in the context of art? What is added to it?
I guess what would be added to it is the the appreciation of it, the appreciation of like we go every day, we see so many beautiful textures, even not even talking technologically, but just like industrial, whether that be on the sidewalk, whether that be a wall or a ceiling. Um, there's so much beauty around us that we don't see as beauty, or we can't see as beauty until we are kind of disconnected or put in having that everyday thing put into a different context.
Yeah, somehow I feel like if you just took the Mona Lisa and cut it up, it wouldn't be glitch art. Like it wouldn't work the same. But like somehow it's like there's something alive about glitch art. Like especially like when you see if you see like the one that you suggested when you walk past just a glitching out screen at like the airport or something. It's not quite glitch art, but it's something more than just a decayed or cut up work of art.
Yeah.
Um, I'm not sure what it is, but like something carries over, but something like yeah, something either gets transformed or added to it. Yeah, maybe it is just our attention and
I think it is that
seeing.
it's that transformation that's key. Now I kind of want to cut up the Mona Lisa, and I think the closest I got to that was I did this episode about romance, and I used the film Van Gogh, the kind of which I used the VHS of that and ran it through my circuit benders, the video signal, and on that you do kind of get a little bit of the um, a lot of kind of Van Gogh's paintings, but in this different context of having it be not only on video, but then video that the signal is ran through a circuit bender device that is changing the colors, changing the textures, and changing the overall kind of visual experience of it. And even though this isn't glitch art, I kind of see that in the more recent projection projects that they have, the like experience Van Gogh or whatever it's called, where you walk through this kind of immersive Van Gogh painting where it's projected on all sides of the walls in the white cube of the gallery setting.
I haven't heard of that. That's interesting. What about? Do you think Naked Lunch, the original book, is glitch art, or does it have to be digital?
Absolutely. I think Naked Lunch, but especially everything that that cut up model inspired too, not just like literary, but if you think about musically, the cut up with just the kind, not saying Naked Lunch directly inspired hip hop, but the amount of cut up in other genres of music and sampling, specifically like if you think about the band and kind of movement, if you will, of Psychic TV, of their kind of embracing the cut up to the full extent of, you have musically like a rock band, but then you have them putting out all their the acid tapes, which are kind of uh acid, what's the genre name, acid house, like acid house music, but very like this kind of this ongoing tempo of the kick drum snare, but then mixing in all these different samples from whether or not it's audio of someone doing like a political rant or different music samples, kind of, and creating this like layering on top of each other. And then they would also embrace that with as far as like collages go. And I'm curious because it's like, at what point does a collage become glitch art? Does it not become glitch art until it's scanned in and another kind of, because there's, as far as the definition of glitch art, there has to be this technological element where traditional collage is very much like analog of a glue stick. And then so I guess it becoming glitch art is, yeah, adding more of that technological element. So maybe Naked Lunch the book is not, but obviously you can make glitch art out of it.
It does require like technology.
Yeah, because my final thought is even the glitches inherent in Naked Lunch are specifically because of the technology of the time of him sending it to his publisher out with the chapters out of order and it getting printed that way. So that it, yeah, I guess now that I think about that is glitch art. It's not digital glitch art; it's more like analog. But yeah, you could definitely call Naked Lunch glitch art because it is embracing that technology of printing. Um, but the flaw of it being out of order, which kind of creates the work and make is what makes it interesting and why it's still kind of a a literary staple.
So I wonder how far back you can take it. If you can sort of stretch glitch art to include Naked Lunch, the cut up technique, where like for people who aren't familiar, it's like he had the whole book written, but he just like cut up the lines and rearranged everything so that it's almost it's almost unreadable. But at the same time,
Mhm.
it's a different kind of like reading experience because you're getting bits and pieces of the story scattered throughout. But you could do that with scrolls, like you could do the cut up technique on, I don't know, Plato's Symposium or something, and it would still, but it's still like there's a medium. So then how far back can you take it? Is glitch art just like a newest manifestation of something more fundamental in art? Is it like creative destruction, recombining things any way you want?
I think so. And I think you bring up scrolls, which is really interesting because, in a sense, we have that with works like the Greek magical papyri, which are cut ups not intentional, but cut ups because of when they were discovered and kind of historians trying and archaeologists trying to piece them together and trying to make not necessarily a cohesive narrative since it's a book of spells, but a cohesive work in and of itself. And there's so much in it that refers to itself and refers to like, so it'll be like a spell listed out, and then it'll say like use the usual, and it's like what does that mean? Like it doesn't have, but if these are like an actual like magician or like Egyptian priests notes, like he would know what the usual is. It's like when you're getting a recipe from someone, it's like, oh yeah, then it's like just add the usual of like adding the usual spices or techniques to it. um but it's interesting because that's, yeah, it wasn't even like necessary, it wasn't like an artist intentionally doing it, but maybe that is the glitch itself, is that it's not intentional. It is a mistake of them being out of order and them not being preserved and so many scrolls over history being destroyed. And then it's also interesting, if we want to get into it, to talk about kind of psychedelia too. The I remember when I was getting into glitch art, a lot of it was like, oh well, like it's using technology to make this kind of trippy psychedelic art. And I don't remember if it was on Tumblr or where it was, but someone was talking about kind of, if you think about, you're going in and you're messing with the code of a image file and then you're exporting it and you have this new kind of thing. If you think about it psychologically, with drugs, especially psychedelic drugs, of just lysergic acid being not like, it is very much a drug, but it's a, a neurotransmitter, and just this one molecule added to the system can change so much, not only psychologically but just like visually, of how you see the world. And is that a glitch? And then whether or not it's disproven or not, but the kind of like stoned ape theory of early hominids discovering and cultivating magic mushrooms to have these shamanic, or shamanic for lack of a better word, but spiritual experiences of communing with nature and communing with a world that is other.
Yeah, that's super interesting. There's two threads that I want to follow there, but I'll go on this last one first. The stoned ape theory. The idea, it's not just that apes got high; it's that by getting high on mushrooms so much, they created an atmosphere where a certain type of thinking, people who thought in that way, like those genes, would be kept. So it affected evolution, so that like our consciousness evolved partly because different types of thinking were then selected for. So that's like glitching life itself. It's like glitching the genome itself by introducing this chemical into the brain, not introducing it directly to the DNA, but introducing it into the organism's life so that it created a different environment which selected for different genes, which is like super interesting as like a complex process which altered life if the stone ape theory is true. I have no idea if it is, but like it's interesting to think about. But then like one of the questions I had was to take it back even further. Like life is kind of a glitch if you think about just the mathematical universe where everything just does what it does, but life is this self-perpetuating concept almost, but like it's not really a concept at first. A microorganism isn't presumably aware of itself, at least not according to the materialist perspective, but like it's this well, for one thing, it's like a locality of anti-entropic organization which just expanded ridiculously. So and like if life is a glitch in material reality, I like life, so I support life. I think it's one of the highest thing. It is the highest thing. It's almost our responsibility as thinking creatures to be able to nurture life, but that means nurturing a glitch. But glitch is like creative destruction almost, so it's like there's something radical and weird about that. So I don't know, that's not really a question, but can you riff on that?
Yeah, totally. I think I don't think it gets as like my work in itself, I don't think gets that broad, but it is in a sense of like, you talk about creation through destruction, and I've kind of had that theme running through my work aesthetically, even going back to printmaking, of you're destroying this block of wood to create this imagery. And that follows through with me now being a VHS collector, and then me using this kind of like archaic dead media form to create art out of it, and to use these visual motifs to create a new story. And I do think it's interesting, yeah, um thinking of a life as a glitch, and the amount of times when you're like not in a good mental space, when you're like, man, like I'm not even supposed to be here, like, or I'm not even here by my own volition. Like none of us chose to be here. We do in a sense choose every day to stay here and to keep this glitch going. But the initial choice, well, maybe, I don't know, how conscious were we, uh if we're not looking at it as a material, um scientifically, of intelligence. But yeah, maybe, I mean, maybe if there's a way to like quantumly compute and see your life or your timeline completely separated from yourself. Maybe way back in the day before you were even conceived, you did have a choice in the matter and you chose to be here.
Another thing sort of associated with it, scrying. I think that's the word. So when like
Mhm.
because you mentioned too, like magicians, the I forget how you framed it, but there was like spells or recipes that were
Yeah, I
like
talked
magic
about
spells or recipes.
the Greek magical papyri, which is a book of spells that was, I don't even remember when it was initially the first kind of scrolls were found, but a lot of it's in the British Museum. But it was a book from like kind of Alexandria, Egypt, and a lot of kind of Western esotericism is based on it because like one of the rituals from it, the headless rite, which was taken by Aleister Crowley and then kind of mistranslated as the bornless ritual or the bornless rite. So instead of being this invocation of this god without head, which we now kind of associate with Osiris being like beheaded, it was this kind of he saw it as like invoking this one who is without being born. Um, but the Greek magical papyri is, yeah, it's a book of spells from Alexandria, Egypt. So it's kind of a culmination of there's Greek spells, Egypt mythology, and spells. There's kind of Jewish magic. There's Gnosticism in there. There's just kind of throwing anything at the wall that sticks and anything that works. The kind of theory behind it is that a lot of it were during Alexandria, it was Egyptian magicians working with the kind of Greek magicians or like the priesthood to write down the spells for for the first time. That beforehand, all this Egyptian magic had been, you know, just the giant steles or just like written in stone. So this was the first time that it was being written in scrolls so that it could be transported between Greece and Egypt. And so this kind of sharing of kind of mystical or magical thought for the first time between various cultures.
So now I wonder, like, if there's any reality to the conjuring of things with spells. If you glitched up a spell, would it just not work, or would it conjure some monstrosity? Would it have these like unexpected effects?
I think it would. I think there is a kind of a current of that I have heard called glitch craft, which is, you know, play on words between when glitch art and witchcraft, of using the talking about Burroughs the Naked Lunch. A lot of people have kind of in the occult scene have sort of embraced the the cut up nature and using kind of cut ups as spells, but specifically sigil craft of kind of the step in making a sigil is like eventually to kind of like forget about it or kind of just like have it in the background as like you see logos every day, but like even the 100 million times you're scrolling through Twitter and you see the McDonald's logo and it makes you hungry or whatever, but you don't actively every time you see it think like, oh, that's the golden arches, that's McDonald's. You just keep scrolling. So there is that kind of forgetfulness, so that destruction element of yeah, you, I feel like you can definitely embrace, if you want to go down that path, embracing technology, whether or not you're conjuring up some sort of monstrosity, uh is for kind of each individual user to figure out, or whether or not that monstrosity is already there and you're kind of, I don't know, tapping into it. I think you kind of do see that. Are you a fan of Grant Morrison?
I don't think I've read any.
So Grant Morrison is a comic book artist. He has beef with Alan Moore. They kind of have, they both for wanted to be kind of the go-to kind of like magical comic author, and I feel like they both read each other's stuff and both kind of like mess with each other, where Alan Moore's work is more kind of archaic, or not archaic, but more kind of this kind of exploring this like old world in kind of magic and mysticism. I feel like Grant Morrison is more kind of this futuristic blending of sci-fi and occultism, and you see that in his work The Invisibles, which was somewhat autobiographical, but the kind of story behind it is that he wrote it as like a hyper sigil. So he wanted all these changes in his life, so he kind of wrote himself as the main character in his own story. And so I don't know, it plays with time and time travel and all these kind of like weird out there ideas. um Whether or not that does kind of conjure up something, some sort of monstrosity, I'm not sure, but I do know anyone who's kind of like read The Invisibles, I feel like a coherent, a common theme you hear heard back from people who are into Grant Morrison or into that comic in particular is that things start getting weirder when you read
Oh
it.
wow.
There's something to it. I don't know.
I'll have to read it then. That's interesting. It's been a while since I read a comic. I'm a huge fan of Alan Moore, though. The League of
Mhm.
Extraordinary Gentlemen is amazing.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah. I don't think there's anything by Alan Moore that I've read that I didn't like. But it very dense author. Well, both of them I
Yeah.
feel like are very dense. I tend to drift more towards Grant Morrison just because I'm more into the yeah kind of sci-fi techno technological aspects of it. Um, it's tough to say who has had more influence on me creatively though.
So, okay, if the medium is the message, what does glitch art say?
Very good question. I think especially my work in particular is kind of influenced heavily by vaporwave, which I think in and of itself is kind of a form of not only influenced by glitch art, but is a form of glitch art in itself, of where the kind of differentiation between vaporwave from just like chopped and screwed music, which I love chopped and screwed, but the biggest differentiation is the critique of capitalism found within vaporwave that may not necessarily be in chopped and screwed, um where a lot of time like vaporwave was like using the tech, where I feel like chopped and screwed is a genre, but it's also very much like a technique creatively of, slowing down music, chopping it up, and creating a new message out of it, whether that be like songs about drugs, but then it's chopped and screwed that creates this kind of like melancholy or sadness that you can hear in the music of like DJ Screw, of this kind of, this in the thralls of addiction that's like in some way glamorizing it, but in other ways being critical of this depression found within opioid dependence, where vaporwave kind of took those techniques that had been created and innovated by DJ Screw and then applied them to music you would hear at the mall, music you would hear in an elevator, um, commercials that are dead and gone that can only be found on YouTube. So these kind of, it's almost as if like technologically you're digging up these old scrolls or these old artifacts of past world that, the way corporations move, they want you to forget about, but taking it up and creating something new out of it. Um, so you said the medium is the message.
So, what's the message of glitch art? It's a very open ended question. It's kind of
Yeah.
not fair, but like,
Yeah, the message of glitch art, I would say, is very much about creation through destruction, but also the message is transformation. And you can take that as kind of like as broad as you want it to be, but it is kind of transforming something where all the pieces are there. You think about a kind of initiation ritual or a death and then like a subsequent like rebirth. The there's still elements of the or any or like the hero's journey or something like that. There's still always like the elements of the original message that then has like a new message like through the journey of it, if that makes sense.
yes. Okay, so you mentioned like the anti-capitalist nature of vaporwave. I actually hadn't heard that before, but it kind of makes sense, like the melancholy feeling of being trapped in a mall, basically,
Hmm.
or like a bit broader than a mall. But yeah, but do you think this is something I wonder? This is a very general question again, but is anti-capitalist or even like truly subversive art even possible on the internet when like we can only make this stuff with capitalist products, right? Like nobody is forging their own silicon
Yeah.
and coming up with like a new kind of computer to do this. Like it all depends on not just having an expensive computer, which is made through like hyper capitalist processes and distributed and everything. But it's like you also need the internet to be alive right now. So you could imagine in like a post-apocalyptic world where there's no more internet, but we can get these things booted up. Then in that context, it's a different kind of thing. But like right now, we're in it, right? So
Yeah.
is it really anti-capitalist? Can it be?
I think yes, in the sense of that goes down to like how can you critique capitalism when you still like have to eat food, of the fact like we don't really choose whether or not we are in a capitalist society, we just are. And I don't know, I feel personally, although I am still in like very much like solidarity with kind of anti-capitalist or socialist movements, at the same time I tend to disconnect myself creatively in the sense of when I'm creating art, it's as out of a necessity, out as an artist to express that. And it's not like when I'm creating the Omnia Sol art show, it's not like I'm trying to like create this like propaganda that's going to wake up the masses or anything, because it's not that at all. But I don't know, in a sense of, yeah, just being, I don't know whether or not there can be actual anti-capitalist art, but I do think that people can, um, I don't know, express themselves and try to organize themselves differently. Whether or not they succeed in that has yet to be seen.
There is at least an attempt to stay ahead of the marketers to some extent, but they're
Yeah.
always pretty close behind and they're always learning. Like no matter any innovation you do to evade them in the moment becomes part of their process in the future. So like
Hmm.
you've got to find some new angle, which is super weird, but also kind of important. It's funny you say that about yeah, you're not consciously thinking about socialism when you make art necessarily. But like I'm reading a book by Hans Jonas about it's called The Imperative of Responsibility, and it's about how technology, modern technology has changed ethics, or at least our relationship with that ethics. And one of the things he was talking about for one chapter was art and the artist's responsibility to the work of art, which is part of like the moral like we he's saying that we have a responsibility to life generally and to human life specifically, but also
Hmm.
that like the artist making a work of art is what makes us human to some extent. But at the same time, even though that makes it kind of a moral imperative, he has to have like a radical dedication to his work of art without thinking about morals, because
Hmm.
the work of art needs to be itself like fully.
Yeah.
So
Well, I think it's in terms of like politics, it's like people can debate all day about, policy changes and the world that they want to see, and hopefully go out and try to create that. But when it comes to art, I may not be an anarchist per se, but I do think there needs to be kind of an anarchistic approach to art and creation. Like art needs to be free. It's the one free thing we have. And even like, even though there like the history of art is definitely trying to like, obviously there's so many attempts at censorships, there's history of like art being destroyed in certain cultural or political contexts, but that's the freest we're going to be, because if you do think about kind of fiction and even your relationship with kind of writing and fiction, that's where you can be anything, whether or not you're like reading a book or writing a book, that there is this like escapism to it, that I don't think a lot of times people think of like escapism as a bad word. And I don't think it is, because I think the kind of escapism is how something starts as escapism, and then it goes from like, say like Shawshank Redemption, you have this idea of digging a tunnel out of your prison. And then that what starts as an idea and what starts as like kind of a fantasy of being free then ends up being like the plot or the blueprint to get free. And so, yeah, thinking maybe that's the anti-capitalist art, is like, how can we kind of plan for utopia? And in a technological context, of how I know you've talked about how the technology got us into this mess, but it's also what it's going to get us out of it. Uh there is no Unabomber utopia of us all
No,
going back to the hunter gatherism. That's gone. We technology is such a part of us, where it's like your phone is like such an extension of your brain, of your ears, of your mouth, of how you just communicate with yourself and think and process and communicate with those around you. um where that's not going away. The same with like cars or transportation being an extension of our feet. But I do think there's, yeah, there is that, where there is different ways and better ways to organize that technology, which I don't know if how public transit is in Canada, but in the United States it's like absolutely terrible, because everything, capitalism has, and this kind of liberal individualism has tried to put us all into our like individual cars, that we all need to strive to get a car and then get a better car, and then you're stuck in traffic for hours. Where like, why don't we have, there's countries that aren't even socialist that have so much better transportation than we do, and they still have cars, they still have but they have more bikes everywhere, and they have like better running trains. And I don't understand why infrastructurally we haven't gotten to that point. It's so like regressive in the United States.
totally. In Canada, it depends on the city. In when I lived in Montreal, I felt that they had a fantastic uh, public transport system, mostly because the subways were just constantly going. I'm in Ottawa, where it's not nearly as good. They spent like 5 or 6 years building an LRT, light rail transit, which sucks. Like it just breaks down all the time. I wish they'd taken the extra time to build like a big underground. But at this, like once there's a big metropolis sort of or a big city, it's really hard to build these giant underground tunnels.
Yeah,
But yeah, I totally like the generally this the individualism is it's weird that people don't acknowledge that we're social creatures, right? Like you got to take this individual freedom. Like there's always a balance between how much individual freedom versus how much do you give to the community. And you got to constantly kind of renegotiate that. But you don't just say everything to the individual at the cost of the community completely. Like that's a parasitic kind of thinking. And it's weird that it is such an ideology. And like we could take a big step towards socialism and still be extremely capitalist. It would just
yeah,
be healthy to have like you guys don't even have healthcare. Like that's one
yeah,
of the big things here in Canada. Like obviously, if I get hit by a car or I get cancer, they'll just fix me, and that just makes sense. Like even if you're thinking in capitalist terms, you want the employees back at work, but there's
yeah,
something kind of
exactly. Yeah,
hyper parasitic about it. I'm not sure where it comes from, why it's constantly so forcefully entrenched. But yeah, the hyper individualism is very weird and I don't think healthy. Hopefully, there'll be a movement back in the other direction, but I'm not seeing it. Okay, yeah, you were talking about escapism, and I like okay, escapism is kind of a matter of perspective, right? Like if you are doing escapist art and I'm criticizing you, and I'm here in my comfortable house and I'm listening to I don't know, whatever isn't escapist. But like to me, it looks like you're escaping from whatever I'm in. But to you,
hmm,
maybe you're headed towards some different land that nobody else can see. So
hmm.
there's also like the exploration of something. So escapism might be a matter of perspective.
Yeah, and it also, yeah, depends on what you're, yeah, like you said, like what you're escaping from.
Yeah. And freedom is a range of movement. It's not just freedom from something, it's a range of
Mhm.
movement. Um, okay, so who are your favorite glitch artists or your favorite works of glitch art?
So yeah, that's a very good question. Some of my favorite glitch artists are the my kind of approach, especially to video glitch art, which I hope to someday get out of, is kind of like in the sort of like how in the music scene you have the pedal bros when it comes to noise music, of just like, instead of being kind of like very innovative and making their own thing, it's just like so dependent on the pedals. And that's kind of where I am. But as far as some of my favorite glitch artists, I think those are like some of the people who have actually made those pedals and kind of improvise these techniques, such as like Tachyon Plus is one who has made a lot of stuff. One artist, BPMC, Big Popper Modified Circuitry, is another one that two of mine that I use quite a bit are from BPMC. This artist in, I believe, Portland, Oregon. There's another one, Andre J. I'm not sure. I think Andre lives in New York, if I'm not mistaken. But their kind of approach to it is these Raspberry Pi based video synthesizers that kind of use this form of delay with it. One of my, I guess my really kind of favorite right now is, which I'm not even sure this person's name, but I'll look up and plug their Instagram if I can find it. It's Lo-Fi Future. Okay, yeah. So LOFI_future, and then just like all one word, lofifuture.com, is this glitch art who also makes different pedal techniques. But one thing I've seen them doing recently, which I've wanted to get my hands on, but being a British creator, this would be end up being in like PAL format, and I need the different region, that, what is it, NTCS, the color format.
I don't know.
It's either NTCS or N. Someone will email you and let you know the real one. But instead of the PAL format, the color format that they use in England. But Lo-Fi Future has been circuit bending these PlayStations and PlayStation 2s. That is just like amazing to me, the results, because it's not only getting kind of video results but also just different like audio results with it, because both the PlayStation and the PlayStation 2, just their kind of graphic, the way it is circuit bending is so different when it's the actual machinery, where the kind of work I've been doing is taking the video signal, taking the RCA signal and glitching that with the VCR that is already kind of producing that, or DVD player, or even PlayStation or GameCube. This, since it's modifying the actual system itself, the results are like so different than anything I've ever seen. I'm really enjoying seeing Lo-Fi Futures work, and I'm one someday I hope to get, or even either get or figure out how to circuit bend one of these older video game systems to add that to my arsenal, creative arsenal.
Yeah, that's cool. Let's talk about methods a little bit, if you don't mind. So
Yeah.
the you talked about like you would load stuff into Audacity, like load a picture into Audacity, run some
Mhm.
effects, and export it. I've heard of that. What about like you just mentioned circuit bending, and I had a friend years ago who would just mess around with his keyboard and just make it do weird squeaky noises. Like, what are the major methods for glitch art if somebody wants to make glitch art? And in a second we'll talk about like apps or whatever, but like the traditional forms of glitch art, what are the methods?
So the traditional forms with analog, which we mentioned circuit bending, is taking a lot of times the stuff that we kind of know of or see as a glitch art, especially in analog context, is taking old video processing gear, whether that be like it was originally meant for like TV studios or just for like editing your own home videos, taking that and taking the circuit board and changing that to where to create a completely new kind of device and aesthetic. And then there is kind of later there, in the more digital sense, one of the biggest things that people think of when they think of glitch art is data moshing, which is use another kind of, I guess also why it counts as glitch art is, one, the video changes so much from what it's supposed to be, but also in the sense of like using the program not how it's meant to be, using this video art program that's meant to, or not even video art, just video program that is meant to just edit and process videos. And then like, well, what would happen if I, like take out the iframes or multiply the p frames in this video, and then the results that you get, which is now just like embraced in music videos all the time, uh anywhere, from psychedelic artists to like kind of mainstream rappers like ASAP Rocky. I think even the first time I saw glitch art in general, glitch art in that context was data moshing. And I saw it in a Kanye West video with Kid Cudi off of like 808s and Heartbreak. I think it might have been Welcome to Heartbreak that kind of like embraced that aesthetic, where I remember the first time a friend showed it to me was like, this video looks broken, but I think they did that on purpose. And that was in high school, my first kind of introduction to glitch art. And it would take like over a decade later for me to get into glitch art after seeing it kind of take over. And maybe even, maybe I'm too late. Maybe that moment of well, no, I shouldn't say that, because I do feel like glitch art is, especially since I started posting more, kind of getting more mutuals in Instagram or on the internet of other artists kind of doing similar things. Um, so yeah, I don't think glitch art is dead. I feel like we're just kind of in the beginnings, but I do think that as far as analog goes, those video processors are getting harder and harder to find, because you think about not just music videos, but you think about as far as like VJing, doing like visuals for live performances for bands has become such an in demand thing of like, you don't just go to see a band anymore. You go to see the light show, you go to see the video, you go to see this like all encompassing experience. So as that's, become more popular, it has become harder to find. I think kind of, yeah, the future is more in this kind of Andre J method of these embracing the digital, for lack of a better word, but these kind of Raspberry Pi based systems.
Yeah, it's very cool to create a machine using the Raspberry Pi to do that. I like the fact that they're doing that. Do you think? Okay, I've got a plugin for my Paint.net installation that has just some nice glitch effects, and I have an app on my Android phone. I forget what it's called. Do you think those are those legitimate, or do you think those are like cheap bastardizations? Are you a purist? Should somebody go to the? Should they only do it with like the traditional methods?
I am 100% not a purist, in the sense that I talked about data moshing. Data moshing on a Mac has become almost impossible, with the exception of, because the main software that people would use to do traditional data moshing, you can't even open on Mac's OS anymore, because they're, these, what are they, the 16-bit programs, and or whatever Mac switched to, because I know it was recent where they switched to like they only use like 16-bit programs. So anything that's like, I could be misspoken if it's like maybe they switched to 32-bit and their 16-bit has become like archaic, something like that. But anyways, they switched the format that you can even open programs with. So a lot of programs became unusable on a Mac, but you can still data mosh using a plugin on Adobe After Effects that is for sale. Not going to plug that. That's not a free ad, but that plugin itself downloads those original software that you can't use on a Mac, downloads that to create these effects. And so it's
Wow.
still embracing the old effects. I feel like a lot of times those programs, that's what I don't want to do, is I don't want to be elitist with any of this, because it's like a lot of, even if you go back and you watch the first episode of my show, that's the interesting thing, where now my show is kind of delving more into artist interviews, but it starts with me making it meta in the sense of me trying to figure out how all this works. How do I get the best visual? How do I translate what I'm seeing on the CRT television, which is the best picture coming out of this, and how figuring out techniques of how do I capture that and translate that to the audience so that I can share what I'm seeing with everyone else. So yeah, I don't see that using those apps, but I will say, like, not to be elitist, but at the same time, I think like experimentation is key. So how can you, if you're just doing these apps on your phone, how can you take those and figure out a new technique to add on top of it that you haven't tried before? Or what I try to do a lot with my video work is, how can I combine all these images and all these different techniques together and kind of curate something new? So it's not just like, this is the video I got from this particular processor, but combining all that and then combining the digital data moshing elements with it too. So yeah, I think experimentation is key, and plug something in somewhere, try different techniques, and yeah, have fun with it too. That's the key, is definitely having fun. Um, as far as you mentioned, kind of someone who wants to get started in glitch art, I would say go the method of opening a text file, opening an image as a text file, looking at all the code there, and then don't do the beginning code or the ending code, because then it'll just like corrupt it to where you can't do anything with it. But go to the middle somewhere, start copying and pasting, start typing in your own, either uh, whether that be intentions, poetry, gibberish, or just copying and pasting code, and then exporting it and seeing if you can get it, seeing what effects you can make on it with that. And then if you want to go further, then yeah, talking about programs like Audacity, taking in making a BMP file of an image that you want to glitch, importing that in Audacity as raw data. And there's templates online you can easily find with Googling it. But then, yeah, applying different pedal effects, different sound effects to that file. And also, like, it's going to be abrasive noise, but listen to the sound file that Audacity creates out of the raw data of this image, because it is abrasive harsh noise. But I've even embraced that creatively, of making like harsh noise albums of this sound. It is a glitch. This sound should not exist. This is an image file, but this sound software has interpreted this image as sound. And what does that sound like?
That's cool. Yeah, I think there's no chance of glitch art being like dead because it seems more fundamental than just a genre. It's a method, and it's a sort of, and like if we entertain the stuff I was asking earlier about, like, is naked lunch or whatever glitch art, then it might be something fundamental just to art. It might be like part of art in general, like rearranging things that shouldn't be rearranged, and it conjures something new.
Before your next question, you asked about my favorite glitch artist. One that I forgot to
Yeah,
mention, that I'll kick myself if I forget to mention them. My friend Devin Larson, DVN Zook, ZOOK, DVN Zook on, or Devin Zook on. You can find their work on Instagram, but they might be a very interesting person to reach out to interview on this show, because all their work is very much influenced by technology. Not only are they a glitch artist, but they are a video game designer, and so they kind of bring in glitch art to create these video games, and create these alternative video games that deal with everything from a cyber afterlife to, they've got one that's about this that was originally called Technomancer, but then they changed the name to, I think it's called like Into the Depths, of this wizard who is like astrally projects into the digital world and has to fight these computer viruses, and would be a very interesting person to reach out to and to interview.
that's crazy. Yeah, please send me a link for him and for Lo-Fi Future.
We'll do.
Yeah, last question. What are your spiritual or philosophical beliefs? Maybe this has no connection at all, but maybe it does.
I definitely think it does, especially if, like, you watch the old episodes of the show. I had this segment on the show which I've carried over in a different format into my new show that I'm working on, Glitch Peaks, where I read like a tarot card on air. And I do think, as far as I don't necessarily know if I have beliefs. I kind of exist in this sort of agnostic state, but an agnostic kind of animistic state of, I kind of, yeah, see the world, we're living on a living planet. And so I don't know, I've definitely had weird interactions. I've used the tarot enough to think that there's something there, just like, and it very well could be just like psychological, of you get the message that you need, or just a kind of psychoanalytical way of, uh I have a question, I look to the deck for answers, and all the deck is has so many symbols that your mind can embrace onto and create these patterns. And so, yeah, uh, using the tarot for advice, and coming up with some pretty good answers. So I guess the thing I can say for sure is that I exist as far as I know. The world around me exists as far as I know, and that I think there is magic. Magic is real in some form or another. What magic means, I think, is a whole other podcast, uh, as far as the definition of magic goes. But I do think we live in a um, a magical world that is also, scientific. But I think those two can coexist.
Yeah, they have to. Like, you can't really deny either one. Like, you can't discover consciousness through material, even
Yeah.
though they're inseparable. Animism is something that, like, I don't know if I'm animist, but like, I don't believe that there's such thing as inanimate matter. Like, it's all
Hmm.
animate.
Hmm.
So I don't know what that means, but it means something. Okay,
Even
so go ahead.
just thinking in the terms of like personhood, like anyone who has, like, we both are cat owners. Anyone who's had a pet knows that, like, the whole science of like, oh no, they don't have consciousness is like, that's someone's lying to you. Like, if you've been around a cat, like, you're not just projecting your own personality onto the cat. Like, animals have their own personality, and I think we can kind of extend that technologically, not even just talking about future AI or anything, but even just with me using VHS tapes and CRT televisions in my work and using computers, is that when you have a level of respect for these quote unquote objects, I feel like they work better. Like, if I'm having technical difficulties, and instead of getting angry about it, if I can step back and treat whatever technology I'm using as a person and acknowledge that personhood and be like, okay, like, take a deep breath, like, we're in this together, let's make this work. I feel like there is this mutual respect, whether or not I'm just that's just making that up in my head to make me feel better. But I don't know, like, I do think objects kind of take on their own personality. um, and every object has a history, not even from the factory that it was made, but if you are thrifting or buying like older stuff like that, that television lived in someone's house for so many years, that VHS tapes not had a line not only from the time it was produced, but it makes me think of, do you know the short film Plastic Bag?
No.
I
Oh,
forget the
wait.
director, but it's the Werner Herzog narrates it.
Okay, no, I haven't. Okay.
So that it's like a 15-minute short film. I believe it's called Plastic Bag, but it is the kind of all narrated by Werner Herzog, and it's the kind of life, death, and rebirth of this plastic bag. So it's like at the grocery store, like, I breathed my first breath, and it's the plastic bag being like, taken apart at the line to like put something in it, and then like referring to the person who takes the plastic bag as like my creator, my owner, or whatever. And then just like this life of being thrown out as garbage, and then kind of like these myths of this like heaven place that ends up being like the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, of that all these plastic bags are trying to go where they can all like live as one, and in in the ocean. And it's just interesting, and it's like that's the kind of um philosophy I try to take towards objects, not to be a hoarder, but to acknowledge the fact that everything in our material reality has a history and has a story.
Yeah, that's excellent. Like, there's any number of different ways that you could look at that, that it's a good idea. Like, whether if you want to take an extreme materialist perspective, you could just say that, like, it's placebo. We trick ourselves into treating them well, and so then they, respond well simply because of our, like, that they don't have to have any consciousness for it. Like, uh, uh, if you sing to your plant, you'll probably not forget to water it. So, like, maybe the singing
Absolutely.
is irrelevant. But at the same time, like, if you take that to an extreme, then you would have to, like, deny consciousness in the first place, because, like, the fact is that um, hunger, the experience of hunger, is an evolutionary adaptation. It compels me to eat. Like, it's not just subatomic particles moving,
Yeah.
how they move individually. Like, I am a thing, a unified thing, and to some extent you just have to apply that to other things. Like it's hard to know exactly what that means, but it's true. Okay, that's yeah. So that's yeah, that's an excellent way to end. Okay, so let us know about Glitch Peaks to see us out. Plug Glitch
Yeah.
Peaks. What's that gonna be?
Yeah, so Glitch Peaks is actually coming out. The pilot episode is being released March 15th. It's going to be at sidestreetstudioarts.org/glitch peaks, and I'll send you the link to it. I am developing it. My show I have my original show I put on YouTube, but also Side Street Studio Arts around the time of the pandemic. They're a nonprofit art gallery in Elgin, Illinois, and then with the pandemic happening, with having to be shut down, they wanted to kind of make a way for artists to make money during the pandemic. So they started a Vimeo channel called Side Street TV, and I sent in a single submission of a music video to be featured on it. And Tanner, who is one of the people who founded and runs the gallery, checked out my other work and was like, "Hey, would you like to have your show just on Side Street?" So I've been doing that for a while, and um, so this was the first kind of spin-off show that I pitched to Tanner specifically for Side Street. And I think we're going to have the pilot be free and the other episodes might be behind like a paywall where you can rent for like $1, to like raise money for the gallery, money for the money that it takes me to put into production wise. In the sense of like, not to put everything behind a paywall, but just the sense of like, if people care about it, they're willing to pay for it. Kind of seeing where it's like, if I've been putting out my show for free for going on, got like the 45th episode coming out this week, and there's not like a ton of viewership for it. So for this spinoff show, kind of trying something different while keeping my main show free. But the concept of it is I'm glitching the entire VHS collection of Twin Peaks, starting with the pilot and then going through all 5 tapes. So 30 episodes of the show. If the show kind of picks up and people seem to like it, then I will do more with it. There's a lot to do. You can do Fire Walk with Me, The Return, as well as The Missing Pieces. But yeah, so it's a kind my the way I think about it is my glitch art love letter to the world of Twin Peaks that Mark Frost and David Lynch have created. And maybe when I'm in a few episodes in, if we ever want to have another show specifically about Twin Peaks, because there's a lot I could say in terms of how we kind of touched on like animism and those kind of themes of spirits and nature and living in a kind of a magical or spiritual world in the physical.
Totally, that's excellent. Yeah. Anything else you want to add?
No, thanks for letting me on the show. You can check out my work at my website, omniasol.art. If you watch some of the episodes and you like it and you want to support me, I do have a Patreon, patreon.com/omniasolart. And I'm sure those links they'll be on the show notes and whatnot. But yeah, thank you so much for having me on.
No problem. Yeah, I was gonna say I totally support paywalls. Like support art. I think I like free stuff too, but I like paying for stuff so that it gets made. That's cool.
But it's really cool with like with what I found with Patreons too is like I am more willing to support a Patreon, not if it's everything's behind a paywall, but if like like there's certain podcasts I support where it's like the main podcast is for everyone, but if you want it without out ads or like bonus episodes, I love of like, because it's like not only are you supporting it, but you're like, I get so much enjoyment or joy from this. Like I want to like pay and have this kind of like extra added bonus to it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Omnia Sol, and take care.
Thank you.